Bodega, 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 alpha and omega. Siamese sailors sell celery sandwiches. Sawing-a-bada, serving platter.
Hey, Jamie?
Yes?
Did you want to try reading that line on the script there?
Oh, yeah, let's see. You could save big when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, that one?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm just not warmed up yet. Shouldn't be long. Detector test.
Bundle your home and auto with Progressive today.
The marmot mangled my mushu pork pancake.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Hey, we get it. You don't want to be hearing a Progressive commercial right now, so let us tell you something you do want to hear. You are intelligent. You make all the right decisions. You were smart before smart was cool, and you made it cool again. You have a wealth of knowledge, and you are so very clever. I bet you already knew I was going to say that, you genius. There, don't you feel better? You'll also feel better when you hear you could save big when you switch to Progressive. But I'm pretty sure you already knew that, too. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. One of our running themes here on the podcast is how the elites are always in bed with each other, how they're always covering for each other, and how the means always justifies the end. And we've talked about that quite a bit here on the podcast. And they continue to show that behavior at every turn. No matter what happens, it seems like all of these elite, so-called elite, I should say, are all circling the wagons. They're all protecting each other. Nobody knows anything. Nobody can help. I'm going to do the honorable thing, but when it's time to be honorable, I won't do that. You know, it's just the same old nonsense from all of these people. And we see it under a microscope in this Jeffrey Epstein case. All of these people who were powerful and in positions that could have stopped Jeffrey Epstein, literally stopped him. What, you think somebody like Bill Clinton couldn't have told people what was going on? You think Trump couldn't have stopped him? Yeah, all of these people that he hung out with. My point is, these elites, they really love to cover for each other. And they really love to navigate the legal system and the laws that their friends put on the books. In our article today, we're going to talk about just that. This article is from fairobserver.com. The headline, Alex Acosta and the Guidelines of the Elite. Now, again, this is systemic, right? The elite covering for the elite, and people like Alex Acosta, well, he's not top of the food chain, of course, but he's certainly in the conversation, right? At least rubbing elbows, certainly would be considered more so-called elite than than me or you, right? So, of course, he wants to be propelled into that next level. He wants to be rubbing shoulders and getting a job on a president's cabinet, doesn't he? So would he be able to do that if he was ruffling feathers or making it difficult for his bosses to do what they have to do? Of course not. Acosta was a yes man. Acosta was a low-level so-called elite. And I've said that from the very beginning. This is a guy who was given too much credit, all right? And he did not wield that much power nor deserve that much credit. This is a man who was a mid-level operative, someone who was taking his orders from Mukasey and those on high, and he eventually ended up becoming the fall guy. But not after enjoying a bunch of success and being part of a president's cabinet for a while. So it was probably worth it to him in the end to be the fall guy here. This article was authored by Peter Isaacson. Two fundamentally ambiguous events concerning the Jeffrey Epstein affair have left many people wondering how far the web of influence around the convicted sex offender extended. The first was the trial that ended with a sweetheart deal allowing Epstein, an American financier, pedophile, to be virtually free while serving prison time. The second event was his apparent suicide in prison as he was awaiting trial on separate charges. Yeah, there's no doubt about it, right? It's two big questions that there's no answers to. And every single time we think we have some more answers, we just end up with more questions. And a lot of that has to do with the seedy-ass Just Us department and them not being transparent, and the so-called elite covering for the so-called elite. The conditions surrounding his suicide are so spectacularly equivocal that any rational person can only be dumbfounded by the uncritical acceptance by the media of New York City's medical examiner's declaration of suicide as definitive. Well, I've been saying that for quite some time, right? Look, I'm more than willing to accept it was a suicide. I'm not sitting here telling you about little green men and Sasquatch and the chupacabra, even though all of that shit is fascinating, right? We're not dwelling in that realm. We've already left the world of conspiracy theory, folks, and we've been involved in unraveling a massive cover-up, right? That's where we're at. But the CNNs of the world, the Fox Newses of the world, the mainstream legacy media led by outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post, they're just so willing to accept the narrative when it fits their own bias. But when they feel like they can score some political points, or they feel like they can be involved in some division, all of a sudden they're hard-charging journalists once again. It's bullshit. It's tired, and I really hope that we make these people pay the best way possible, and that's by tuning them out. I can't tell you the last time I turned on the news, Fox or MSNBC or any of the other garbage networks. It's all trash, folks. It's all programming. And none of it is beneficial to us, in my opinion anyway. CNN, for example, reporting on the most recent news concerning the 2005 trial and the sweetheart deal, writes dryly, Epstein died by suicide in a federal jail in August 2019. No nuance, no questioning, no allegedly, none of it. And do you really think CNN did an exhaustive investigative look into this? Of course they didn't. We've been following the case every single day for over a year, and we have not missed a day. Has CNN been at the forefront here? No, they have not. So who are they to come out and declare that, well, this is how it is, especially considering they've been telling us for a year, basically, longer, MF Barr, Barr's a liar, Barr's a criminal, Barr's a thief, Barr's this, Barr's that. Now all of a sudden we should accept Bill Barr's narrative at face value? Why is that? Ask yourselves, what does CNN have to hide here? What do all of these legacy media companies have to hide here? Are they in bed with Epstein a lot deeper than we even knew? Quite possibly. And I'm sure all of that will be unraveled as we continue on this journey. In the article, CNN cites a review by the Department of Justice finding that Alex Acosta, President Donald Trump's former labor secretary, exercised poor judgment when, as U.S. Attorney in Florida, he gave sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein a non-prosecution agreement. It adds that the review did not find that Acosta or other prosecutors engaged in professional misconduct. An absolute joke, by the way. And we've talked about it ad nauseum at this point, but it deserves to be mentioned again. It was complete negligence at best. And at worst, it was these guys colluding with Epstein's lawyers to give him a sweetheart deal. So I have a very hard time believing it was all negligence, folks. Today's Daily Devil's Dictionary definition: poor judgment, the commonly attributed failing that explains why a crime committed by any member of the elite, defined as those who empowered to judge the acts of others and exempt from being judged by others than their own, cannot be considered a crime since the mistake of showing poor judgment eclipses in gravity the crime itself. I like that definition. That is a fantastic definition of what poor judgment is. And it's fitting here, right? It's all about these so-called elites consolidating their power, rallying around each other, and shitting on the rest of us. Contextual note. As a federal prosecutor and then President Trump's Secretary of Labor, Acosta belongs to the middle ranks of the judicial and political so-called elite, just as Epstein belonged to the middle ranks of the financial and social so-called elite. Epstein appears to have been associated with the international intelligence elite. And look, let me tell you what, the Fair Observer so far is spot on in what they're talking about here. Mr. Isaacson, the author, obviously is well read, has obviously done his research, and is another person who is seeing the forest through the trees, who sees that these so-called elites are the real problem, and he also knows how it all works. Like I always say, folks, there's levels to this shit. That offered him supplementary security because intelligence can never be accused of crimes since its duty is to be engaged in serious criminal activity. Boy, it sounds like I wrote this article almost, huh? 100% spot on. These intelligence people are a huge problem when it comes to freedom and when it comes to operating on a different level of the justice system than the rest of us. Do you know how many people these intelligence agencies are responsible for displacing worldwide and killing worldwide? Who do you think was involved and in charge of all of George Bush's black sites? Who do you think was in charge of getting the coordinates and the kill order for Obama to drone strike an American citizen? What do you think, that shit just materializes? No, these disgusting assholes within our intelligence apparatus are continuously working against the people, continuously thinking that they know better. And if you think that they don't have their fingers all over everything in this country like they do elsewhere, then you have not been paying attention. By virtue of their belonging to the elite, both Epstein and Acosta knew they were at least theoretically protected from ever being convicted of serious crimes. But so are people like Harvey Weinstein, who belonged to the entertainment elite, or Bernie Madoff, who worked his way into the financial elite. Epstein, Weinstein, and Madoff demonstrate that it's possible to go too far in exercising poor judgment. All three had, at some point, probably lost any notion of there being such a thing as too far. They thus learned they weren't quite as elite as they imagined themselves to be. And that's the rub, isn't it? There's always somebody much more elite than you are. Like I always said, Jeffrey Epstein was nothing more than an asset, nothing more than a piece on the chessboard. And there are very, very evil, very sick people who had their fingers all over this shit. And until we can, prove that, though, it's hard to really talk about, right? I don't do that really here on the podcast. I don't go on fishing expeditions. But I will tell you this. If anyone thinks that Jeffrey Epstein was doing this himself and operating in a vacuum, then I have about 800 and something articles 800 and something episodes that they should go and listen to and learn them something. Because this is much more vast, much more widespread, and just like the author says here, these low-level, mid-level, so-called elites end up getting burned just like the rest of us when their handlers are done with them. And we're seeing that happen in real time right now with Ghislaine Maxwell, by the way. The Epstein case helps us to understand one important principle, that in the circles of the elite, there are always two levels of logic that protect them. The first is the phenomenon of the first offense, or the first occasion in which the subject crosses the line that could expose the nature of the game. The less timid or cautious actually push their luck to discover where that line may be before pulling back to their safety zones. Wow, that's a great way to explain it, right? These people love to push their luck. They definitely love to push their luck. And of course, when they get busted, they can always fall back the first time and say, well, look at all the good I've done. I have charities. I helped kids with cancer. I helped your mom across the street with her groceries. That's the kind of shit they use as their security blanket, right? The second is the security deriving from the self-interested solidarity of the elite. They will never betray the secrets of their peers, whom they learn to protect passively. Passive protection translates as the rhetorical skill of denying even awareness of actions deemed compromising. Well, doesn't that fit the bill? Doesn't that shoe fit, Cinderella? All of these people knew. They knew what Epstein was, and they just denied that they were even aware of it. It is important to avoid recourse to active protection, such as rising to the defense of a peer. This is frowned upon because it may raise suspicions of complicity. Individual sins can be brushed away. Collective sins require more effort. Oh, there's no doubt. There is no doubt that the whole entire so-called elite class has the same defense. How long have we been saying that? They'd rather just deny that they even know the guy. Never mind rise to his defense, right? No, we weren't close. Then you're like, well, we have footage of you guys hanging out, eating, family gatherings together, Thanksgiving dinner at your house. What do you mean you weren't close? But then they'll try and gaslight you. They'll try and, use their vast power within the legacy media to spin the narrative. And then they hope that you don't see the forest through the trees. But boy, they're in for a big shock, aren't they, folks? Sexual crimes, Epstein, Weinstein, typically individual sins but not crimes, if found out and verified, are paradoxically and least forgivable, especially today after the Weinstein scandal and Me Too. Judicial crimes and crimes of political influence, such as Acosta is accused of, are easily dismissed because they are generally viewed as part of the job of balancing interests out among the elite. That is so true. And another thing that I've talked about, right? You can get away with stealing. You can get away with all kinds of robbery and all kinds of misdeed. But boy, oh boy, you cannot get away from this. You cannot get out from underneath something like this. And if you think it won't sink you, think again. Just look around at all of those people who were around Jeffrey Epstein. Look around at all of those people who have now had to step back from their jobs, from their careers, from their royal lives. Then there are serious political crimes, including war crimes. In some sense, they are the easiest to gloss over because they are motivated by noble, i.e., nationalistic, intentions. But because they concern public policies, they become highly visible and can draw the attention of political opponents. Protecting them becomes more complicated, requires working closely with the media, and takes time. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Look, the media was so gung-ho about just all of the military interventions we've had. I mean, look at the New York Times when it was going to war with Iraq, everyone trotting out the weapons of mass destruction and being on board. George Bush has been protected for how long by both parties? The guy's an obvious war criminal, responsible for millions of deaths, people being displaced, and all kinds of terrible, terrible feelings about America being seeded across the whole entire Middle East. And he's never been held accountable for anything, right? In fact, since he was not a big, as big of a evil demon as Trump, the media is even starting to warm up to George W. Bush all of a sudden. And as far as working with the media, we know that. We know that the elites are not only working with the media, we know that the elites are in the media, and the elites are running the media. Take the example of Elliot Abrams, President Trump's special envoy, first for Venezuela and then for Iran. He was convicted of lying to Congress in the context of the Iran-Contra scandal during the Reagan administration. He even admitted in an interview to being seriously involved in the micromanagement of the Contra death squads in El Salvador. President George H.W. Bush pardoned Abrams in 1992, who continued to provide his services to George W. Bush and now Trump. This is what I'm talking about with retreads as well. How many more times do we need to send these bureaucrats back to D.C.? There's nobody better to handle this than Elliot Abrams, who was convicted of lying to Congress? Nobody better, huh? All this is public knowledge, which means mildly embarrassing but not compromising. It explains why a prominent member of President-elect Joe Biden's transition team, Kelly Magsamen, can even today justify her active collaboration with Abrams in a now-deleted 2019 tweet visible here. Defending her work with Abrams on the Trump administration's shambolic effort to provoke regime change in Venezuela, Magsamen explains, "I worked for Elliot Abrams as a civil servant. He is a fierce advocate for human rights and democracy." It's always human rights and democracy, right? Whenever it's something that has to do overseas, it's human rights and democracy. And when it's home, it's always Social Security and for the children. There's always these cliche rallying cries, right? And I'm tired of all of them. Yes, he made serious professional mistakes, and he was held accountable. I'm a liberal, but I'm also fair. We have a lot of work to do in Venezuela. We share goals. It's so terrible. I mean, this is what you guys can expect in the Biden administration. Warmongers. People who really think that forcing regime change in places like Venezuela is a good idea. Here's a really novel idea. Why don't we mind our own business for once? We have our own dirty yard that needs cleaning. So before we hop over the wall and we start admonishing our neighbors for their dirty backyards, how about we start right here at home? Goals justify everything, but mistakes happen, leading to accusations of poor judgment. Convictions also happen, sometimes followed by presidential pardons. That is what is called being held accountable. Most significantly, bygones become bygones. The elite has a job to do, and solidarity is an essential part of that job. Man, this is very well done by this author, and the sarcastic tone of it cannot be missed. It's like they exist just for this simple purpose. Historical note. The capacity of elite networks to protect their members, especially when it involves national security, i.e. the intelligence community, has always been impressive. Yeah, no doubt about that. How many times have you heard of people involved in the intelligence community being brought up on charges, prosecuted, anything of the sort? Very rare. Every now and then you'll get a fall guy. But for the most part, come on, man. These guys are above it. Mass murder, sowing seeds of division in countries, regime change, color revolutions, Arab Springs, you name it, these scumbags are involved in it, all using our tax dollars, by the way. Not only can they accomplish enormous tasks that may or may not involve serious criminal activity, from massacres of civilian populations to assassinations of political leaders and even scientists, they are particularly skillful at covering them up, delaying and distorting the perception of truth, and influencing the commercial media to disseminate their version of the truth, while characterizing all other accounts as conspiracy theories. Boy, me and this author should probably get together for a chat. We should probably sit down and talk about some things, because I certainly share a lot of his opinions when it comes to the elite, so-called elite, I should say, and the shell game and the political theater that takes place on a regular basis. Alex Acosta's public explanations of his sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein was anything but convincing, as any spectator should be able to notice. In response to the question raised by his own explanation that Epstein was an intelligent asset, he responded, There's been reporting to that effect, and let me say, there's been reporting to a lot of effects, and I would hesitate to take this reporting as fact, he then added. I can't address it directly because of our guidelines, but I can tell you a lot of reporting is just going down rabbit holes. He said reporters are reporting 4 times in that paragraph, folks. And, boy, it's crafty. The strategy is impeccable. Call the issue reporting, meaning it could be just hearsay. Then mention that other hearsay exists, suggesting that it is all equally incredible. Then invoke guidelines that no one understands, but everyone accepts as being crucial to our own common security. The final touch consists of asking for questions from another reporter to avoid follow-up questions to one's evasive answers. It's exactly the strategy that they employ. Pay attention to it. I hope that after all of our time together, one thing that I've been able to impart that I try to drive home on a regular basis is how the media is bullshitting us on a regular, daily, minute-by-minute basis. These people are not interested in the truth. They're interested in headlines. And then you have people like Acosta, the elite, so-called, who are able to manipulate that whole entire structure because they understand the game. They know the deal. History provides us with many examples of how the work of the elite to cover up its most public crimes produces effects that last decades and disqualify the truth even when it finally emerges to the light of day. Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated 52 years ago. The evidence that the bullet that killed the senator was fired by a second gunman is overwhelming. A lengthy interview half a century later with one of the forensic pathologists, consulted for the autopsy, but not for the trial, not only presents that evidence, but reveals how and why it was covered up at the time. Look, I don't know much about the JFK assassination, right? So I won't even begin to delve into that. This is just one startling example of how the media continue to create enough doubt about decades-old affairs to protect the elite of the past. It appears to be part of their job protecting today's elite. Acosta has nothing to worry about. And look, Mr. Isaacson is 100% spot on with this article. And Acosta is just, again, he was the fall guy, right? He was the guy that ended up holding the bag, but he knew there'd be no ramifications at the end of the day. What's going to happen? The internal report just came out, and it basically told everybody that, well, it was just poor judgment, and that there was no evidence of any sort of criminal behavior or negligence, or it's an absolute joke. And if you don't think that the Department of Just Us is involved in this whole entire way of manipulating the truth and covering things up, then I don't know what to tell you. Because I know for me, myself, personally, I have zero faith in the Department of Just Us. And I find myself being very, very, very cynical about everything that they say. But one thing is very clear. When it comes to so-called polite society and the so-called elites, the means always justifies the ends. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And to everybody who has supported the show, I appreciate you folks very much. I'll be back later on with the Daily Drop, and we'll see what in the hell is going on then. Hope you folks all have a great day.
You went online to switch your car insurance to Progressive so you could save money. But then you saw a friend request from an old summer camp buddy. And now here you are, clicking through photos of his kickball team from 2011. Looks like they won the championship that year. Then he moved to Tulsa. Oh, a new tattoo. Yes, they said it was easy to save hundreds on car insurance with Progressive, but they forgot about the rest of the internet. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. National average savings by new customer surveyed who saved in 2019.
We're Weaver, a national CPA and advisory firm. And we firmly believe that when you put people first, the numbers follow. Weaver, accounting for more than numbers.